I think it's now the moment for
Sick of the Week. Sick of the Week. All right. It's time for Sick of the Week. A segment that needs no introduction, but I'll introduce it. It's where I get to talk about whatever I feel like talking about this week. Not that I don't already do that on this show, but this one's special. Okay, I don't know about you guys, but I have been feeling emotionally ill for the last several weeks. So I wanted to focus on something positive, like how cool science and medicine is. So I'm focusing on this one story. For the first time, someone has received a transplant of their own stem cells, which has caused their type 1 diabetes to reverse for at least a year, which is appropriate. We just talked about diabetes last week. As you might recall from last week's episode, people with type 1 diabetes need to inject insulin because the cells that produce insulin in their own bodies have been attacked and they've stopped working. For several years, scientists have had some success in getting some people off of insulin dependence by taking islet cells from the pancreas of donor organs, donor pancreases, and implanting them into the portal vein, which is the vein that takes blood from the abdomen to the liver. 78% of people who have had this procedure were able to stop taking insulin for a while. Many of them needed to return to smaller doses of insulin over time, but it's some alleviation of the burden of type 1 diabetes. But the kind of downside of this procedure is that they also have to be on immunosuppressive drugs for the rest of their lives in order to avoid their body rejecting the donor cells. And of course, being on immunosuppressives puts you at higher risk of disease. These procedures, which are very rare in the US due to how human islet cells are regulated in this country, is also, really dependent on the supply of donor organs. So there's a lot of limiting factors to something that helps, but is maybe not a permanent fix for people. But now, for the first time, a woman with type 1 diabetes has received a transplant of her own reprogrammed stem cells that allowed her to be independent of the need of insulin starting at 75 days after the transplant. And she was still not needing to inject insulin at her 1-year follow-up. 2 more people have already had the procedure and were both insulin independent at 3 months after transplant, but their follow-up time is shorter. So we'll have to see if they maintain that for longer. The patient that, had insulin independence has had insulin independence for at least a year. She had already had 2 liver transplants and was therefore on immunosuppressive drugs already. But in theory, immunosuppression might not be necessary because the cells are coming from your own body. So we need to see this procedure on less medically complex people to be sure. But I think that we can all agree that it's kind of nuts. As I say on Love Island, it's early days, babes. But what an achievement in the quest to cure a chronic autoimmune disease. It'd be very cool if this continues to work out and other people can get it. So that's why scientific research is getting a big old wonderful Sick of the Week this week.